Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your film, Rack. It's an absolutely amazing, wonderful documentary about ayahuasca. I'm David J. Brown. I'm a science writer. My background is in psychobiology and neuroscience. I was a neuroscience researcher for a couple of years, and since then I've been mostly writing about health science and more lately about psychedelic drug research. I have quite a bit of experience with LSD and ayahuasca and DMT that I've learned quite a bit from, and happy to share what I've learned, and I'm really, really happy to be here. So thanks very much for having me.
I'm Albert Forty. I'm a gardener. I've been studying psychedelic drugs for about 3 decades now. First here at University of California, Santa Cruz as an undergraduate, and then because of some LSD experiences I had, I went to graduate school, to divinity school, to study the history of religion and use of sacred plants. And then came back here, taught a little bit on campus, and I've been published a few books. I've worked in the underground. I've done some field work with ayahuasca and MDMA, and happy to be here to have a discussion with you.
Good evening. I'm the Dr. Juan in the Rosacita experiments. I met Rack that year, 2006, and he kept in touch, and he would send me emails every now and then telling me that he was writing a book, and could he put my name in there, and this and that, and would I give him a release. And I wasn't sure what he was doing or what it would turn into or anything. And then later he says, well, I'm making a film now, and would it be okay to show you in the film? And I thought, well, it's probably, 10 seconds or something. And then I saw the film, and I was a little bit shocked and also delighted, because I think he did a wonderful job. I honestly was unaware that you had the cameraman there, and this was really quite a professional production.
I had the blindfold on, Ryan. What do you mean? You don't remember what was happening?
I was so focused on, trying to get the data. So we recorded from 3 or 4 other subjects that day. It was quite an amazing day. And, I've continued doing that research, and now I have a sizable collection of excellent recordings. And, I'm trying to figure out how to get this stuff out there, publish this stuff, because it's pretty exciting. There's been some replicates, I'm a neuroscientist, and I think I've been interested in psychedelics ever since I was around 17 or 18. I grew up in Mexico City. And somebody told me about Aldous Huxley. And anyway, it's been a wonderful journey all my life. I'm now in the position of being sort of we are the elders now, right, of our generation. So I like to share my experiences with the younger generation and make sure they work properly with this medicine. It's very important to do this right. And many ayahuasca journeys, many wonderful other experiences. And it's a delight to be here to be with this group. And in Santa Cruz, I'm so happy this came here.
My name is Mariana Dinkova, and talking about doing it right, I've been doing it or training with ayahuasca since my early 20s, and I was always upset that people were not given any kind of tools. I drank with so many different shamans, and only one, the very first one, said, you can die, by the way, and if you die, enjoy. It's a very special experience, have it, take notes, you will be back. And since then, I've watched so many people without that information struggling, trying not to die, versus going cosmic jackpot. So one of my passions has been gathering tools and giving people information. I'm a psychotherapist, so I used to teach workshops with David J. Brown and some of them by myself on navigating altered states, which is all about the psychedelic toolkit, which is a combination of psychological, transpersonal, and new shamanistic tools, all kinds of really trippy stuff. I'm a geek about this stuff. And now I'm doing also retreats and bringing people to Peru, where I do the psychotherapy part and the toolkit part, and I work with different shamans, and that's been super rewarding and good to be here tonight.
I'd also like to thank the invisible guest here tonight, which is, of course, the MAPS organisation, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. Not that you're invisible, but you're all out there in the audience, and they've really helped set up the event. There they are, waving up from the soundboard up there. And, maybe we'll just open it to the panellists. So we've got this interesting dynamic happening now in early 21st century culture, where after, more than 500 years or so of sort of dominator culture subjugating, the old world and indigenous people and the church as it went through and sort of suppressing whole cultures that did worship the plants, like, the cactus and the psilocybin mushrooms and things like that, and indigenous people who kept their sacraments hidden from the Western people because they could see that, that it wasn't appropriate. They were trying to destroy the plants and also what the plants connected to. But we now have this sort of rebound and this sort of karmic loop coming full circle where, this is the generation. It's this wave of ayahuasca seekers, and beyond ayahuasca as well. It seems that because ayahuasca is a very potent and replicable medicine that can help people on many levels, whether that's physically with their ailments, emotionally, with things that may be stored in their emotional bodies, or on a deeper spiritual level, connecting them to themselves, to the spirit that's in them, and to the planetary spirit as well. It seems to be pioneering, and it has the legacy, it has the indigenous unbroken legacy that people can find the elders, as one said, we can go down to Peru and relearn and kickstart in the West this remembrance of the shamanic dimension within and without. But there's also teething problems, and there's also a lot of culture clashes as this is happening. So I might just throw it out to anyone on the panel who wants to comment on, I guess, their experiences with ayahuasca and this sort of larger cultural clash that's happening at the moment. Robert?
Well, one of the first things I want to say, there are two things going on here. When you start to study the phenomena of religion, there are two separate things, I contend. The first is that there is an esoteric realm, a realm of experience and mystical phenomena. And this is what really draws people to. We're born with this innate drive to seek the sacred, to rejoin the sacred. This is actually, of course, what the word religion means and the word yoga. And shamanism is probably the largest body of these techniques of accessing this esoteric realm. Okay, so opposite that is the exoteric world of religion, where cults are formed, and this esoteric realm is not transformative in a beneficial way, but is used actually to mind control or to control populations, and it becomes actually in many ways the opposite of what the esoteric realm is really all about. So I'm putting this out there now because one of the things that's become apparent to me over many years of my inquiry is that the psychedelic movement is like a microcosm of this world of religion. And that we all know that there are these, ineffable, beautiful, profoundly meaningful realms of experience that we can access. But that it's also important, I think, to point out, especially today, where we have this tremendous renaissance going on in modern society. There's more recognition in the mainstream media about psychedelics than there ever has been before. And that it's important to understand, and I'm starting to get into this more than I have in the past, that these drugs were introduced into our culture in a very dramatic way. And I used to think that it was a part of a religious revival in the creation, the conscious creation of a counterculture that would serve as a rebuke to the military-industrial world that was starting to take over. And, that's not totally true. In fact, that the mind control apparatus of the industrial society, the CIA, was in very large measure responsible for these drugs being introduced to the public. Gordon Wasson, who you may know, who I personally worked with a little bit, was in fact working on behalf of the CIA to publicize the sacred mushroom that he found in Mexico. Now, there are many, many consequences of that discovery of that sacred mushroom, and I think it's an important question to look at. Why would mind control apparatus MKUltra want to initiate a psychedelic movement? Because it seems to me now that that's what that did. Now I'm saying that in this context because this film is part of what we're seeing and calling the globalization of ayahuasca. Now I've made myself, half a dozen trips to the Amazon in different ways. And what I've seen happen down there to the more or less indigenous or mestizo use of ayahuasca with this influx of tourism is not necessarily a good thing. And there are parts of this film, now Rack and I've known each other for several years now, and I really appreciate you as a person and your shamanic journeys, but when I watch this film now for the second time, there are parts of it that disturb me, that seem to me to fall into a kind of element of cheerleading and sensationalism that may be destructive and in conflict with the sort of deeper reasons that we're doing this. So I don't want to talk too much, but I thought I'd put that out there to start with.
Well, I have almost 180-degree different opinion about psychedelics and ayahuasca. My feeling is that we're in a huge ecological crisis on this planet right now, and that psychedelic plants are literally designed by nature in order to help us become more aware and more ecologically aware. What I wanted to say about ayahuasca, I had experimented quite a bit with DMT and harmaline. I would drink Syrian root tea and then smoke DMT, and I really thought that was an ayahuasca experience because it stretched the DMT experience out, it slowed it down, it was much more comprehensible, and I didn't realize until I actually went down to Iquitos just how different doing the actual indigenous plants were. There's something really special about ayahuasca that's different than just doing DMT and harmaline. There's the spirit of the Amazon is truly embodied inside of the plant medicine. And one of the things that really occurred to me when I was down there doing the ayahuasca was, for the longest time, I had been telling people in workshops, I do workshops with Mariana about how to navigate altered states of consciousness. And I've always taught basically, Timothy Leary's formula that setting, and dosage are the three primary factors that play a role in determining what happens on a psychedelic experience. And when I was down in Iquitos doing ayahuasca, I realized that there was a fourth factor that I'd overlooked. And that was the intelligence and the consciousness and the intention of the plant itself. And it's very obvious when you do ayahuasca that there's an intelligence communicating with you. It's obvious with mushrooms, and it's not as obvious when you do LSD or a lot of the other psychedelics, but I've become convinced that it's now a factor in what happens during the psychedelic experience is that the intention of the plant. And I think one of the primary intentions right now is to teach human beings to become more ecologically aware. It's very interesting that psilocybin mushrooms proliferate and grow specifically in areas where there has been ecological upheaval, where there's new roads being built, where there's construction sites. It's almost as if they're a response from nature. I mean, isn't it interesting that so many people have ecologically aware experiences on mushrooms and on ayahuasca, and these things grow in areas where there's a lot of ecological disturbance. So I think that they were designed by nature in order to help us become more ecologically aware. And I think that it's really our last hope right now, to be honest. I don't think there's that much time left. What's happening in Fukushima and the Gulf of Mexico and just the toxicity of this planet is just overwhelming. And unless people wise up and become more awake very quickly, I think we're doomed as a species. But I'm very optimistic that these things are going to help us in time and that we'll be able to pull through. So I'm pretty hopeful about all this.
Thank you, David. Well, I agree with both of you, actually. I'd just like to comment that, this is, in some sense, artificial distinction between man-made chemicals, which have come from the lab, and natural sacraments that are, grown by Mother Nature. But ultimately, in a whole system theory, it's all nature. And we're talking about the intelligence and the spirit in the plant being the fourth factor. That's very true, Terence McKenna had this idea that I think he got from Bear Owsley, which is the first person I've seen it attributed to, who was an LSD chemist. But Owsley said that he believed that the planet herself is, as an intelligence, is secreting these things as exopheromones, as some type of chemical signature that's activating the species. Because in the Gaian mind, we're all her children, and we're being groomed by her to come back into right relationship. But in the larger historical sense of what's happened in the last 60, 70 years of psychedelic culture in the West from the lab, there's the origin story of Bert Hofman, which, if you dig a little bit deeper, it's a very interesting story. But basically, as a mystic chemist, he admitted in his childhood he had spontaneous mystical experiences and sensitivity to nature herself. spirit of nature herself. And so if the spirit of nature herself does have an intelligence and works through her creatures, she had to get into the lab. She had to have a conduit, a portal through a sensitive mystic chemist to roll out something en masse to shift the vibrational energy of tens of millions of people to change the course of his story. So in a larger sense, I believe the planet was working through the CIA and the people of the establishment like that. And I agree, on one level, it's well documented that the CIA were very much instigating and springboarding the entire psychedelic revolution, but it got loose. And I think either some people in that organization really were the central intelligence and were switched on and have been working through the political and social level of culture, but on the larger Gaian level of life on Earth, we're all being worked by higher intelligence. And I believe and have faith that it's all going according to plan.
I share some of David's thoughts and convictions that we have to really get into a sacred relationship with nature, our Mother Earth, and turn things around, because we're running out of time and we're really messing it up. So now I'll jump to, I have sampled ayahuasca in a wide range of settings, from Santo Daime ceremonies at the church to drinking in a psychiatrist's office, to doing it in a yoga studio in Midtown Manhattan, to doing it in retreat centers in Mexico and elsewhere, and then many, of course, in the Amazon. My very first ayahuasca experience was in Wichita, Kansas, and it was a ceremony that was run by none other than Ron Wheelock, Don Ron, and it was extraordinary. And every time that I've had to drink with Ron, it's been extraordinary. He makes very effective medicine, very good. So I bring a lot of experience, a lot of different points of view. I've seen all kinds of trends in this medicine. I mean, at the Soga del Alma conference, we would have a section of cyber ayahuasca cultists, you know, guys from Berlin, Tokyo, New York City, that were basically buying the vine and supplies online and cooking it at home and having their own personal journeys and exploring that. So my personal direction is to work with shamans and to conduct it in a sacred space. It's important. It's not just an experimental psychotherapy session, but it's actually can be a profound sacred experience. So in that sense, it is like a religious epiphany, and I am aware now of all the problems around ayahuasca. I've been to talks and discussions that they're over harvesting the vine. It's ecologically unsustainable. I also know that there are ayahuasca plantations now in different parts of the world, so it's been taking over. There's in Australia, in Mexico, there's people growing it, probably Costa Rica. I'm sure if you really dig hard, you're going to find somebody in South Africa that's also starting it up. And so I think that's a good thing. And it's a sacred, it's sacred medicine. That's about all I have to say.
I kind of take David's position. It's so true that on one hand it's such a commercial sensationalism lately. On one hand, with all kinds of groups have been kind of taken to Peru, or here a lot. I know so many people who go to their monthly ayahuasca session almost like going to church, take out my sins so I don't have to do the work. So it's one of those super wise medicines that almost has such deep access to your soul that can be still used like a spiritual mouthwash in some ways, with the wrong attitude. Or also seeing what happens in some ways in Peru when I've heard some of the horror stories of shamans who are so looking at the money and don't have respect for the Westerners and going deep into the jungle to drink with the shaman, and the shaman giving you the ayahuasca and just as it's kicking in going, okay, now you have to go, thanks for the money. And people stumbling in the jungle. So there is always like everything there is use and abuse. And on the other hand, though, it's such a wise medicine. I have drunk with shamans with huge egos that were obviously coming from the wrong place, but it was still me and ayahuasca against the shaman in some ways, because it has such an innate wisdom. It has such a beautiful soul space. And on the other hand, there's of course shamans who have not seen so many women with so little clothing. So I have had to work with people who have been so damaged by Guermo and by having sexual relationships with shamans who are amazing in the space, but sexuality is a different aspect of it. So that's been, I know I've heard a lot of stories there being crossed.
Okay, well, I just want to say something really quickly about sex and ayahuasca. It was on the screen before that sex is one of the things that is contraindicated for an ayahuasca experience. The very first time I did ayahuasca, I did it with my lover, and we made love for hours, and it was beautiful. And I got absolutely no sensation that the ayahuasca spirit didn't like it or anything like that. And so I just wanted to add that.
Well, I'll add some context, because at the conference in 2006, Norma Panduro was the prominent curandero, I guess, at the time. And she caused quite a big stir at the conference with all the male shamans, because she said sex is fine with ayahuasca. You know, if the spirits don't mind, it's nothing. But then I was told again by the male shamans that it's the sensitivity of your energetic body, and if another person's energy is almost like maybe competing with ayahuasca, or you could have sex on ayahuasca. And in fact, the night before I drank at Norma's, a couple had sex in a ceremony at Norma's, which is highly inappropriate because everyone is so sensitive in that space.
Just as long as they don't mind snakes crawling all around.
That's true. So it's contentious whether it's the dogma of a patriarchal culture around the sexuality, or if it is actually an energetic thing, and especially with men, about retaining your vital essence, not spending it, to be able to use that energy to travel in the astral and do it. So there could be built-in dogma and reasons for the dogma in the patriarchy of the culture. But what I wanted to talk about is the other hot topic, like sex. It's called religion. And I was thinking, this is a very good opportunity. I'd like to explore this with the panelists. It seems to be, as we've sort of mentioned, we're going into this indigenous culture, we're giving them the money, they're very happy to take the money, and they'll give us a certain depth of the knowledge of how far it goes. Quite often, some Westerners train with the curanderos and they become apprentices, and they go a bit deeper with the knowledge, but then sometimes there's a pushback where the curanderos are going, oh, that's enough, I don't want to teach you, I don't want to give you my real deeper knowledge and secrets. But as it goes out into the West, it does seem to be that ayahuasca is becoming this quasi-religion for, a generation or three that have rejected religion, which didn't have an active sacrament. You had to trust faith, and there had to be the God in the heavens, sitting on the throne with a white beard. All the dogma and the faith is gone, because ayahuasca does have this active sacrament. And as I think it was Robert who said at the start, the word religion in Latin means to reconnect. So what are we reconnecting to? And is it wrong that we're forming basically this slow-mo evolution into a global religion, which crosses all countries, all races, all socio-economic barriers? And what it is, it's a religion of the planet and of the soul. And what we're saying here, I romanticize, and I do take an archetypal stand in the film and in the book, but I believe it's sort of true. It's my intuitive relationship with the spirit of ayahuasca and what it's revealed with Great Spirit and how I integrate that. I believe that the religion, the thing we're connecting to, is the spirit of the planet, of nature herself, whose intelligence has given us these plans to connect to nature herself. So I'm saying, despite all the surface isms of capitalism and the socio-economic things and all the things that go on, what do you think about this idea of a global religion of entheogens?
I think it's a great idea. I think that, again, for me, I think the real importance of a spiritual experience is, again, I think ecological awareness. I think that's what the plants are really trying to teach us. And it's one of the important factors that comes out of a religious or spiritual experience that one can have with a psychedelic. People also become more compassionate towards one another. And I think those are the two most important things that really come out of a spiritual experience, and that's why it's so important. Psychological growth, personal transformation, all those things are possible with psychedelics, but I think what's really